What is up? Big news last night before I went to bed. The Raiders fired Josh McDaniels, Dave Ziegler. We will dive into all of that. Antonio Pierce, former Giants captain and Super Bowl champion, now takes over. We'll dive into all the ramifications, my personal relationship and experience around that franchise, and much more. Some comments today from Gutekunst, the Packers GM, about his quarterback that I think it's safe to say Jordan Love's got 10 more games probably as a Green Bay Packer. And then we will just fire around the league. Before we dive into some football, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, 3 and Out with me, John Middlekauff, wherever you may listen. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hammer that like button, subscribe to the page, and leave a comment, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies. Thevolume.com. We got merch. I got hats. I have FlexFit hats. Thevolume.com. Go get yourself a 3 and Out hat. And other than that, before we dive in to some of my thoughts on the Raiders, let me just tell you about my friends at Gametime, the official ticketing app of this podcast. If you want to go to a game, football, basketball, college or pro, a concert, you a Swiftie, you want to go see, I don't know, the Foo Fighters, Drake, you name it, they have you covered. Just download the Gametime app. And when you do, sign up for a pair of tickets, anything. They got interactive ticketing maps. You can see where you're sitting based on the price point. It's fantastic. Cannot recommend it enough. Just download it on your iPad or your iPhone. And when you buy your first pair of tickets, type in the promo code John, John, promo code John, and get $20 off your first pair of tickets. Gametime app, promo code John, $20 off. Thank me. I don't even need to thank you. Just hammer that promo code. Let's start with the Raiders. When I got out of the NFL and I got into the business of talking, I was associated with a radio station in downtown San Francisco. And there were two. There was KNBR, which was the behemoth at the time. I think they're kind of struggling now, but they had the Niners and the Giants and the Warriors, the cash cows. And then the station I was with had the A's, who were a terrible radio property, and the Raiders. And I ended up getting a radio show right behind Greg Papa, who is now the voice of the Niners, but for multiple decades was the voice of the Raiders. I ended up doing the post-game show for the Raiders for several years. I ended up hosting shows at training camp in Napa. And listen, I'm born and raised in Northern California. Like the overwhelming majority of people, I grew up a massive, massive 49er fan, right? I didn't grow up on Joe Montana. My dad did. I mean, he was old by then too, but the Montana, I grew up on Steve Young, Jerry Rice, to Jeff Garcia. Nowadays, while I still root for them, and I guess I would consider myself a 49er fan, my relationship with football is much more based. Like I think about the show and what I'm going to talk about and how to be interesting just on football in general, more than I do care about the teams like I once did. Still passionate about the Niners, just because I know so many people, season ticket holders. But to me, I'm a football fan, and that's kind of what I've grown into. Like I root heavily for the Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs because of the relationships I had. I didn't know much about the Raiders, right? Most of my friends growing up were not Raider fans. They struggled, I think, brand-wise in Oakland in that area because the Niners kind of sucked up all the oxygen. But when I got to work around them, if you love football, it was really cool. The alumni base, it felt collegiate, from Jim Plunkett to Tom Flores to Willie Brown to a lot of players in the 70s and 80s to Howie Long, guys that come around. And if you're a fan of sports, you feel the history. And I never, people think I talk a lot of shit about the Raiders, but I really appreciated that element of it all. And I got very, very close with Greg Papa, who, beside the Davis family, I don't think I'd ever met anyone who cared more about the Raiders. And it's a powerful thing. And listen, anyone listening that's a Raider fan, just like if you're a Giants fan or you're a Cowboy fan, it's a big part of your life. Now, unlike a lot of the franchises, that team has sucked for so long. And one problem they had, and you could feel it when you were around them, anyone that knows, like if you're my age, like late 30s, in your 40s, in your 50s, and you're constantly talking about college or high school or something you did in your 20s, your life's probably not going that well. And I'm not saying you can never look in the past and think about memories when you get with old friends. But if that is a consistent theme of your life, or when you spend time around someone else and they're constantly talking about, what used to go well, things are probably not going great currently in the present day. And that was always a big theme with the Raiders. They love talking about like the 70s with John Madden and Kenny the Snake Stabler. Now, listen, I love those stories, right? Kenny Stabler's famous line was he could study the playbook by the light of the jukebox. That team in the 70s, some of the stories that I got to hear was like the mob meets the NFL meets like a biker gang. It was incredible. But it was like, this is 2015. The team is a 3-win team. Well, what are we doing here? And I think they've always struggled with that. They're a family-run operation. And Mark Davis, I think to understand the Raiders, you have to understand Mark Davis. And the stories I used to hear, him and Al Davis, I don't think had the best relationship. Like Al wouldn't allow him to fly home with the team back in the day. So Mark Davis, this is not like a 40-year-old guy. This is a guy in his 60s, been through a lot. I think it's as just, I don't want to speak out of turn here, but has had a rough go of things at times. I think has said publicly, he's never had a job. This is the only job he's ever had, that he just inherited a team. I don't know how old he was when Al passed away, like 58 years old. And the team was terrible. And the team continues to be terrible. I will give Mark Davis credit on this for just firing Josh McDaniels. I do believe he has balls. And I haven't been around that many owners. I've spent some time around Jeffrey Lurie, not like that much personally, but I just saw him, on a semi-regular basis. Talked to Jed in passing a couple times, but I definitely don't have a relationship. I don't know other owners. I have talked to Mark Davis probably more than any other owner when I was doing those shows. And I always thought Mark, I think if you just see him on the internet, everyone making fun of him, he's a very easy guy to talk to. Like, it's very easy to have a conversation with him. And I think sometimes the word on people, in sports or just in general, billionaires can be difficult to communicate with. They're just living a completely different world. They live in a world where literally everything is free. Think about that. That's how I heard a billionaire described one time. And it's incredible, right? What's it like being a billionaire? Well, everything's free, right? You got to spend money, but I have unlimited money, so it's basically free. And Mark Davis and the Raiders have always felt like that's not really the case. Now, and I've been saying this for a while, because you have way more money as a franchise, you can afford to spend $50 million to tell someone to go away. Mark Davis is going to get another check from the league office, or it comes throughout the season, for $400 million. And then next year, that number is going to go up, right? And obviously, he's a part, I don't exactly know his revenue share agreement with this stadium, but he's making money on the stadium. So he's got more money coming to him than the Raiders have ever seen, because they were never like Paul Allen or Steve Ballmer or some of these other owners that have all these other ventures. Al Davis started as a football coach. The way I had always heard that he got the Raiders in the first place, he didn't have any money. The mob in New York helped funded him. And he was kind of a just crazy dude and ended up buying and became the majority owner. But what? He didn't have money. This was like the 60s, right? This is a guy who's a football coach, had a whistle around his neck. It's what made him a unique owner. He could also coach, and obviously later became the GM and the personnel director for a long time. And I always appreciated hearing Al Davis stories, because from Andy Reid to Bill Walsh to Belichick, these fucking guys idolized Al Davis. And the Al Davis that I saw in my latter years, like in junior high and high school through early in college before he passed, was not the Al Davis that these guys in their 60s and 70s right now working up in the NFL saw when they were kids in the 70s and 80s. And this guy was a leading maverick in the league. And Al Davis would have done this. What the Raiders had become with Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler was a complete embarrassment. And I have seen some embarrassing teams. And Mark Davis, I saw one team, Mark Davis fired Dennis Allen after 4 games. And then Tony Soprano, the RIP, buried a football, and the team went on to win 3 games, and it led to Khalil Mack and Derek Carr. I guess they were already on the team, but that team was atrocious as well. I think it led to Amari Cooper. But my point is that this team just needs to be blown up. Now, there's several different conversations. I've been saying forever, the league would love to get a super, super rich guy to run this team and get rid of Mark Davis. And his team, I think, would easily get $8 to $9 billion. Vegas, no state income tax, incredible stadium, incredible practice facility. It would be an easy team to sell given the amount of people that could afford it. They would be lined up. I don't believe in anytime soon that he's going to be willing to put this team on the open market. So unless he's forced out, I think this guy's going to own the team till he dies. And I will give him credit for this. I do think it takes balls when you find yourself in a situation to just blow these guys out. And I think a lot of times in football, in relationships, in any business, it's not like they were technically losing money. He could have just rode this thing out the season. Once you don't like her anymore, you're like, well, I'll just play this out for a little longer, right? I don't really want to go back on the open market. I enjoy sleeping with her. And you just delay the inevitable. And he said, you know what? Fuck it. Rip the Band-Aid off. Get the hell out of my building. Josh McDaniels, I think, is objectively one of the worst coaches in NFL history. I want to read you a stat. He's the first coach in the Super Bowl era. So this goes back to 1970 to coach for two different teams and not make it through the second season twice. Fired in Denver in year, whatever, you 1.5. Same thing here with the Raiders. I'll give you a specific number. In Denver, he lasted 694 days. With the Indianapolis Colts, he lasted a little over 8 hours. Obviously, he didn't accept the job. With the Raiders, he lasted a shorter period of time than he left in Denver with 639 days. Now, I think in Denver, he was just a Bill Belichick clone. Everyone couldn't stand the guy, and he was such an asshole, you had to get him out of the building. To me, in Vegas, I don't know if it was that ugly and, the vitriol from the players. I'm not saying it was positive, but I think it was clearly this guy's over his head. He has no clue what he's doing. And let's face it, there is no arguing. It's not even disputable at this point. The Belichick coaching tree is a fucking embarrassment. Like a complete joke. Like this is the crew. Guys that can't, and let's face it, he's their best coaching candidate of all the guys coming out of New England. Now, I would say Patricia, Joe Judge, even Flores. I was thinking about it at the gym today. Flores technically had a better career than those guys, but Flores, when his owner was offering him $100,000 a loss, would not lose to get Joe Burrow. Think about that now, several years removed. This guy would have changed your life, Brian. We all could see it about halfway through LSU, and you're that big of a moron to not realize it, and he ended up beating Cincinnati that year. And then the next year, and listen, how great Tua is, we can argue till we're blue in the face. Brian Flores hated Tua Tagovailoa. Couldn't stand the guy. So Brian Flores, who, good defensive mind, can't deal with offensive players or the big picture understanding to save his life. Now, he's not as bad as Patricia. Joe Judge, to me, is a laughingstock. And Josh McDaniels is one of the biggest failures we'll ever see. Objectively. Can't even be denied. And for about 10 years, Josh was having Dan Pompei and The Athletic and Bleacher Report write all these articles that he was looking in the mirror. It turns out when you make that guy the head coach, he can't coach his way out of a wet paper bag. When he's your head coach, your team will get progressively worse. Your players will hate him. Part of being a coach, and one thing I've heard from people around Josh, one, that building with Ziegler from the coach's standpoint and the players and people around it, heard it was toxic. Heard people despised walking into work in the morning. And listen, people weren't always happy when they were winning championships walking into New England. But at least you knew everyone's on edge a little bit. That's how Bill liked it. You were going to win. Probably a lot like with Parcells. Hell, Bill Walsh used to scream at the coaches, not the players. But you know what? You knew if you sucked it up, kept your shoulders back, head up, looked everyone in the eye, you were going to make playoff runs every single year and end up with rings. The other thing that's pretty clear is Tom Brady, like Belichick, we can argue till we're blue in the face. I think if you gave him a decent quarterback, he'd win a lot of games. He clearly knows defense. He's not good at drafting. His ego's so big, he makes so much money, he'll never give up the GM spot. But if you give him a good quarterback, even obviously Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback of all time, but if you just gave him a solid guy, he's going to be fine. Belichick knows what he's doing. Belichick can lead a room. Belichick can scheme a game plan. Josh McDaniels as the head guy cannot. Matt Patricia as the head guy cannot. Brian Flores cannot understand offense, how to deal with those guys. And if that's the case in 2023, he can't be my head coach. Quarterback, way too important. That's the lifeblood of our sport right now, that quarterback position. So if you can't figure that out or see that, maybe you can with time. Who knows? He got a good lesson the last couple of weeks, seeing Cousins go down and what Cousins has meant to that team. But this Josh McDaniels and the Belichick tree, man, it really couldn't have gone any worse. NBA fans, the wait is over. Basketball is back, and DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, is celebrating with an unbeatable offer. New customers can score $200 instantly in bonus bets for throwing down $5 on the NBA. Win or lose, it doesn't matter. You'll start the season with an instant dub. And with DraftKings parlays, everyone's got a shot at even bigger basketball wins. String together multiple bets from the same game or build your parlay across multiple games for a shot at making your payday even sweeter. Basketball's more fun when you're in on the action. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code JOHN. New customers can get $200 in bonus bets instantly for betting just $5 only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN. The crown is yours. Now, if you're Mark Davis, here's the reality. You're in Vegas. I would imagine many people listening to this have been to Las Vegas. Special place. I love it. I have a lot of love for the Vegas Strip. I really enjoy it. When I was scouting, I used to stay. It was kind of my hub. I used to spend a lot of time there. And I wasn't even allowed to really gamble at the time. I liked it. I can go into a casino and just eat. I like walking around. I like the noises. I like the lights. I like how cold it is. I like everything about casinos. I've been liking casinos since they legally allowed me to enter. Cash Creek, Indian Bingo and Casino, back when me and my friends in high school used to sneak in and play blackjack when I was like 15, 16 years old. Love a good casino. It's a bright light stars place. And it goes back well before I was born. Guy my dad used to work for, was in the casino business back when guys like Ali and Elvis, this is in like the 70s, the end of their careers. And it has continued till now, till Celine Dion's bright light stars. And now sports are coming there. You better win. Because if you don't win, not only will no one give a shit, that arena is just going to be complete outsiders. And that's what Vegas, the Raiders have become, right? Because they're so shitty that when they play the Chiefs, when they play the Broncos, when they play the Bears, the Steelers, it's a home game. That's all it's going to become, is a home game. And I think if you're Mark Davis, you got to swing big. And here he's proven this before. Listen, was John Gruden nowhere near the hype? 100%. Didn't even sniff what we thought it was going to be. I thought he was going to be awesome. And he was terrible. I mean, he was well over his head. But I do appreciate that you can't dispute that many other franchises in the NFL and in college were lining up for years trying to hire John. And Mark Davis had to pay a tax, basically, and his tax was that 10-year contract. But he took a big swing. And I admire anyone. That's why I'm so hard on Dean Spanos. It's like, Dean, you didn't build this shit. You have nothing to do with SoFi Stadium. You had nothing to do with the purchase of this franchise. Your grandpa and father are the ones that made all your money in your family. Now your family has more money than they ever dreamed of having, and they were already rich, and you're so afraid to ever use it. You love getting these cheap coaches, and then you complain when you always lose. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. This is the same thing over and over. Well, look in the mirror, bro. Cut a bigger check. Take a big swing. And there's no guarantee just because you hire a big name coach, it's going to work, but he never does. And if I'm Mark Davis, I got to go big game hunting. And obviously Jim Harbaugh, who has connections, who got his start with the Raiders, makes a lot of sense. I think it's pretty clear with this cheating scandal, he's not going to be there long. I think it's fair to say it would be shocking if Jim Harbaugh is Michigan's coach next season. If this cheating scandal had never existed and Harbaugh had signed some massive contract that Michigan was about to put in front of him, maybe $15 million a year, I would say, yeah, it's probably not even an option. But the moment a picture goes viral, and I've known Jim McElwain since Fresno State, of that dude in the Marines, thank you for your service, standing on the sideline right behind the coach of Central Michigan as they're playing Sparty. Jim McElwain worked for Jim Harbaugh. Like, I mean, you can deny it all you want. Listen, I don't pretend to be a detective here. Not hard to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Jim Harbaugh, his Marine, they were honestly nothing but respect for how deep they went into this cheating scandal. I just saw someone say that, listen, no problem with stealing signs, but when you do it to the level they're doing it, you basically know everything's coming. And when you have better players, it's not a fair fight. And Michigan has been kicking the shit out of everybody since this Marine kind of got on the sideline. I defended him. I said, I think a lot of people are doing some form of this. Nobody, I don't think, was going to the level of getting former employees to give you a hat and a T-shirt wearing their logo as you're playing their rival. I mean, that's pretty crazy. And I know McElwain denied it. And listen, I'm not pointing fingers here, but I don't think it's that hard to put two and two together on this one. So to me, Jim Harbaugh, I don't think they can hire a coordinator. I don't think you can just do Josh McDaniels part deux, Dennis Allen part deux. Like Ben Johnson, for as awesome as he's been with the Rams, the Lions, I don't think you can do that. Like when the 49ers hired Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay was hired, it obviously has worked out, but I don't think you can risk that. You need something that you know. And I heard Colin say, Harbaugh's 100% locked to work. He's worked every single place. San Diego, Stanford, the 49ers, Michigan. He's 4 for 4. Like there are no failures, right? And to me, if you hire Harbaugh, like he's going to work. Now, win Super Bowls, who knows? Just get to the playoffs back-to-back years. Mark Davis would be doing cartwheels down the strip. I don't think another name, and I heard someone on the internet say this is way risky because he's starting to get his ass kicked. I do think from a bright lights, and there's a Gruden aspect, and there's a salesman aspect. I think Deion Sanders, that would be incredible. That would feel very Vegas. It really would. Now, we'll see where they end up picking. Maybe they could pick a son. But Deion Sanders, Vegas, that feels a little far-fetched at this point in time. Again, every time you look up on Saturday, as they've been to Pac-12, they're getting worked. I mean, UCLA just destroyed them. They still have a lot of tough games coming up on their schedule. They're not going to win. So, but I'd be all for that. And then I think the other one is if Belichick becomes available, and listen, I know, well, the Belichick tree, he is the tree. Like Belichick, Belichick knows what he's doing. Like these guys clearly don't. I think you would entertain that if you're Mark Davis. I also think you could sell that. Even if it was just for 4 years, he's given out these massive contracts. That's the other thing Mark Davis has done. You can say he's a bad businessman, but I think he has to pay somewhat of a tax to get people to come to his franchise. He had to give Gruden 10 years, $100 million, because that was the only way to get John Gruden to come to the Raiders. Otherwise, he was going to go to Tampa Bay, right? The only way to get Josh McDaniels, who kept turning people down and was making a ton of money for Belichick, was to give him and his general manager 6 years. It's why, like, listen, I've been fired before. I was making $50,000. My contract ended. Like, what was I going to do? I didn't have any money. The only thing I'd ever worked in football. Like, I was 28 years old. Like, it was tough. I mean, it was very scary time. I'm sorry. I don't feel bad for Josh McDaniels at all. He's got another 30-40 million coming to him. He's already a multimillionaire. Same scene with Ziegler. You get fired and you have 4+ years on your contract at 7 figures a year. I mean, Ziegler's probably making a couple. Josh is making 10+. Like, give me a fucking break. I don't lose a second of sleep. Even Mick Lombardi, I would imagine, was making $1 million, has a 3-year contract. Like, you're not screwed in life. You got a lot of options. Even if you got to take a year off, you got cash coming your way. Now, this is going to have big ripple effects. Guys at the bottom of the totem pole are going to get fired. The guy making $80,000 or $90,000 or $100,000 that doesn't have a multi-year contract and might not know that many people in football. That sucks. I feel for those people, but I never have any sympathy for the guys at the top of the food chain who deserve to get fired and get fired with a lot of money coming to them. Like that's called the fucking American dream. You're going to get paid $1 million to go play golf. Like whenever I see that, these people are humans too. Well, yeah, maybe they're kids, but Josh, go to the fucking gym, get to the elliptical, mix in a salad, and get your shit together. Because what we just witnessed, what you forced on us again was, I mean, what I had to witness on my couch and everyone listening to this on Monday night was a waste of my 3.5 hours. It really was. And obviously the players turned on you, and reports were that players were going to dinner with Mark Davis over the last week. It's pretty clear what they told him. get this guy the hell out of here. And to Mark Davis's credit, he did. I bet a lot of people listening or watching have been in an accident. I bet a lot of people have been into an intense car accident. And let's face it, not knowing who to call for help is hard. Hiring Morgan & Morgan is easy. Because Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm with over 100 offices nationwide with more than 800 lawyers. They've recovered over $15 billion for over 300,000 clients. Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record of fighting to get you full and fair compensation. They've been fighting for the people for over 35 years. Submitting an injury claim with Morgan & Morgan is so easy. That's the key. Not having representation is hard. Fighting with Morgan & Morgan is easy. If you've ever been injured, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless they win. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/John or dial pound law, pound 529 from your cell phone. That's forthepeople.com/JOHN or pound law, pound 529 from your cell phone. This is a paid advertisement. To the Packers. I guess Gutekunst talked to the media today. Or at least to one of the ESPN.com reporters. And listen, what I appreciate about people in football is when you can just be candid. And I think there's a line, right? You don't have to just come out and say, this guy sucks. Or, our defensive coordinator just blows. Even if that's what you think. There's a balance you have to have in a team environment, right? I can say whatever I want. The only people I have to answer to in terms of what I say is me. Like, it just reflects me. There's no one like... This isn't a team of 7 people right behind me that are also on the air, right? If I threw maybe the producer under the bus, that'd be a scumbag. Hey, this guy fucked up a graphic, but I would never do that, and it never happens, right? But in football, everything's such a team-oriented operation, and everyone is accountable in terms they get their opportunity to talk, they're under the microscope. You got to be very careful what you say, especially when it comes to a quarterback. And I think when you look at the Packers, their quarterback situation is already settled. Jordan Love's not going to be their quarterback next year. And Gutekunst said that, and here's why, really quick though, before I go into what he said, I give them credit for not picking up his 5th-year option. Because I think we see this time and time again where teams pick up an option and then immediately regret it. And when it comes to a quarterback or a wide receiver or a defensive end, it can be very, very expensive. And when you pick up these expensive options and then you turn on the player during that 4th year, you're screwed because you can't get out of it. Ideally, you would like to trade it, but if the guy can't play, no one is taking that salary. So they gave him a very, very, cost-effective on their salary cap extension for like $11 million, which obviously if they could do it over again, they wouldn't even have given him an extension. But you have to have a contingency plan if he is good, because you don't truly know till a guy plays games, and it's the bright lights. Well, they've seen him now. And his last several games have been a disaster. I think he has 8 interceptions. But if you just watch him, he's just not very good. And listen, football's hard. A lot of quarterbacks, the overwhelming majority of quarterbacks relative to the top, 10, 15 guys are not that good. And it's very, very difficult to win with. And that's Jordan Love. And like Gutekunst said, he's got 10 games. A lot is on the line over the rest of the season. What he's essentially saying is like, unless a miracle happens, he's not going to be our quarterback anymore. Now, I think, in some organizations, you would get blamed because there was an owner for screwing up the Aaron Rodgers situation, for not figuring it out, for ultimately trading him. But when this team has no owner, like these guys are going to get another quarterback. But this was one season that's going to be on their resume. Ultimately, Rodgers ended up wanting out. They pivoted. And they didn't screw themselves financially. But whoever their next quarterback is, and I would imagine if they keep losing, they are going to be in the mix to draft a guy really high. That guy better be good, and he better be good fast, or these people will lose their job. Because the Green Bay Packers, the Pittsburgh Steelers, Alabama football, Texas football, USC football, there are certain franchises that just do not tolerate losing. And Green Bay has been lucky enough with Favre and Rodgers. They've just always won. They've just been winning consistently for 3 decades. And the moment, it's one thing if you lose a game, but Rodgers threw 3 touchdowns, you're like, our defense could be a little better. When your quarterback play is this shitty, it feels like your whole franchise is going nowhere. So the pressure on this Gudikins and LaFleur this offseason to figure out the quarterback situation. For everything that went wrong with Josh, his interpersonal skills, his ability to relate, Raider Nation not liking him, maybe the alumni turning on him. If Jimmy Garoppolo had just been good, if Jimmy Garoppolo was just playing like the 13th best quarterback and throwing some touchdowns and they were 4-4, he wouldn't be fired, right? What ultimately did him under was Jimmy Garoppolo wasn't just bad. He was beyond atrocious. He couldn't be any worse. He's missed games and he leads the league in interceptions. And his interceptions is one thing. Well, a couple were tipped. One he slipped. It's like hitting guys in the hands. Interceptions that aren't even close. When you consistently miss on the quarterback position, you got problems. So the Packers, you're going to get one more bite at the apple, and you better make it count. A couple other things looking around the league. Matt Stafford hurt. This is why I shorted the Rams when the season started. I didn't know how it was going to happen. I didn't know what the injury was going to be. I just bet on him getting injured. And now he's got a thumb injury. It's looking like he's not going to play this week. I think the Rams are in free fall. I said it during the trade deadline. I would have traded Aaron Donald. I would have reset my franchise. You're losing games with him. And every game he plays, his value diminishes a little. Plus, there's always the risk that he get injured again. So Stafford, we never really got the information on Stetson Bennett, who they drafted, in the 4th round and then just disappeared. Bizarre situation, but Matt Stafford's hurt. The Rams, they're screwed. Deshaun Watson's still injured. Kind of like the Stetson Bennett situation, a little different. It's just weird. That's all to say. It's just weird. And when you pay a guy this much money and he can't play and your team's good, it's pretty devastating, man. It really is. Now, I know when he's played, he hasn't been anywhere near what they traded for or the guy they thought they were trading for. But if you got to play PJ Walker, you're just going to lose more games than you win. I don't care if your defense becomes the 85 Bears defense. Speaking of the Bears, it just never ends. It just never freaking ends. Yesterday, they traded a 2nd-round pick for a pass rusher that they're going to eventually have to pay $25 million when they could have just paid him $26 million and kept the 2nd-round pick. Still baffled by that 24 hours later. Today, they fired their running back coach. And I was expecting, we need a spark on offense. I think his last name's Coach Walker, his family, the best moving forward. We appreciate everything he did. That was not the statement. The statement was basically there was a standard that we hold ourselves to, and he didn't meet the standard. So something happened again. And they had a defensive coordinator resign. He had to fire a running back coach. This Eberflus situation is getting worse. I do not see how Matt Eberflus is the coach of the Chicago Bears in 2024. I can't see it. Anyone else in his shoes, firing coaches left and right, potential police raids on guys' home, having to fire a guy for HR reasons, a coach. I mean, that's crazy. I can't remember the last time, for something that's not public. Like we've seen, remember we saw the one coach, maybe it was an executive for the Lions, drive through Taco Bell naked. Shanahan's offensive line coach, did a little line when he had the stripper girlfriend. He got fired. Like we've seen situations where coaches get fired. It's like, yeah, you got to fire him, even if you don't want to fire him. But you don't see situations like, what are the details? Like, wait, he's not just bad at his job. No, it's not really performance based. It's just something really bad happened. We can't publicly say. That's usually how you get fired as a head coach, because all these guys reflect you, even though they're all grown-ups, they're all making good money. Major problem for the Bears. More and more I thought about Chase Young to the Niners, like the clock's ticking for Steve Wilks. If he can't get this defense back on track and they don't make a legit run again and their defense underperforms, he's going to be a one-and-done defensive coordinator. He really is. You can't have Chase Young and Nick Bosa and Fred Warner and Drake Greenlaw and Eric Armstead and Javon Hargraves and Hufanga and Charvarius Ward and your defense getting sliced and diced on a weekly basis. It's one thing if, on a given week, A.J. Brown beats you and you lose a game. It's another thing if P.J. Walker beats you and then Kirk Cousins has a career day against you and then Joe Burrow looks like an MVP against you. It's like, are you going to slow down anybody? Do you have any, like, if your fastball is not working, right? Eventually you got to try another pitch. Eventually you got to throw a changeup or a curveball. If every single person's hitting your fastball, inside, outside, high, low, you got to come with a different pitch. So to me, a lot of pressure on him. Heineke starting for the Falcons. Another team with just a quarterback issue. Like, what are the Falcons going to do? Obviously, Desmond Ridder backup. Heineke clearly just more of a bridge. Maybe he gives them a little spark. I actually kind of always liked Taylor Heineke. But the Falcons, I thought, had Kirk Cousins written all over them. That clearly is probably not going to happen. And speaking of Kirk Cousins, tears Achilles on Sunday. And Tuesday night before he has surgery, he goes to the Minnesota Vikings indoor like family trick-or-treat on a scooter. I can't remember in recent memory a guy that like everyone kind of universally made fun of. You know, kind of a puss, overrated, geek to just, you watch that Netflix special, you're like, God, I kind of regret all the things I've said about him. I really like Kirk Cousins. I really appreciate him. Anyone that watches it with their wife or their girlfriend, they talk about him a lot. Like, I love that guy and his wife that was buying him, Cole's Bucks. And it's a sad situation. But one thing we've seen with Cousins, super high character, worked his ass off. And even if his best football now is behind him, talk about a guy that maximized every penny and every bit and every ounce of his ability, right? He doesn't have the talent of a lot of guys that fail, but he just refused to not make it and refused to not become a good player. Still had flaws and still not a guy ideally you would look to do better. But if he was your quarterback, I think we've learned you can do a lot worse. It's football season, and you can now get almost anything you need for game day delivery with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Can Uber Eats deliver foam fingers? No. But chicken fingers? Yes. Touchdown dances? No. Buttermilk ranches? Yes. Field goals? No. Grilling coals? Yes. Running backs? No. Ribs? Yes. Blitzes? No. Beers? Yes. Defense? No. Deodorant? Yes. Game clinching turnovers? No. But pastry turnovers? You know, the kind with delicious apple filling? Oh yeah, because that's groceries. And get those delivered with Uber Eats too, along with food from your favorite restaurants and other essentials. And the best part, you can get it all without missing a second of action on your TV. There you have it. Get almost anything for game day delivered with Uber Eats, official on-demand food delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.